how we roll, man. Some rock, some win, some roll, man. Some rock, some win, some roll, man. Some rock, some win, some roll, man. Some rock, some win, man.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Z Showtime number 39. Man, it's been a few episodes, huh? So in this episode, we're going to talk about DVUI, and our guest is going to be David Vanderson. But before we get there, I want to give you some news about this stream. I know, apologize. People always on YouTube complain, man, why is the show starting to this intro is too long? Well, I don't care. It's my show. I decide how long the intro is. Anyway, so here's the news. Number one, I started doing podcasts on a regular schedule with ToggleBit, which I've been, I think they've been really fun for me. Hopefully they've been fun also for ToggleBit, but also I think they've been received positively by the viewers. So if you're interested, we're going to do another one tomorrow. It's going to be at around midday Central European time. So if you're American, sorry, mate. No, sorry, I don't know, friend, whatever. In any case, so it's going to be European time. It's mostly going to be us gossiping about tech stuff. Then on the 1st of next month, I'm gonna be on Melke's stream. So I don't know if you're familiar with Melke Dev, but he streams also on Twitch, and he has been trying to learn some Zig. So I'm gonna show him the first chapter of the Zig book that I'm working on, just like I did with Toggle a while ago. I'm gonna do the same with Melke. So in case you're interested, check that out. Also in my Discord, you will find events for all these things. So with precise times, etc. After that, here's another thing that we did once that I think I want to do more of. And that is the compiler detective agency with Matt Lug. So MLug has been helping me, do things in the Z compiler, see how to tackle bugs, and I think it was fun. It was very fun for me, so for sure. So it would be nice that we continue doing the compiler detective agency. He said that he was willing to do that. Yeah, it's the Zig cinematic universe, exactly. So we're gonna do more of that. So if you're interested in seeing what it means to diagnose a bug in the Z compiler, try to reproduce it, try to debug it, solve it, write tests for it, then you might be interested in those streams as well. And I think we will probably have those in a more US-friendly time zone because some of us have bad sleeping patterns. And so somebody lives in almost Europe but has West Coast style sleeping patterns most of the time. Anyway, so that's mostly it. Other than that, I think there will be also some other interesting projects that I'm gonna try to tackle in the near future. Like when I did the OS in 1,000 lines book, which was also another nice experience. And I'm thinking of doing the same with other similar books. So for example, Ray Tracer in a Weekend, Crafting Interpreters, and maybe if anybody else has any other suggestions, we can see what it means to take on those, nicely packaged projects and see how it is to tackle them in Zig. Anyway, so this is it for the intro, and so let's now get into the main content of today. So David has been a member of the Zig community for a long time now. He mentioned it's been 4 years. So can you believe that? There used to be a time where we mentioned people that have been in the community for a long time were there for months, not years, for sure. But now we're at this point. So he's a stay-at-home dad and part-time software engineer, but he's also an open source software developer. And so he's going to talk about his immediate mode GUI framework. So please give a warm welcome to David. Hi, David. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Everybody can hear me good?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello,
good.
everybody.
Sorry. Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Neek. So yeah, we're going to look up a couple examples. Loris asked me to do a couple examples of some traditional retain mode GUI stuff. And then, so we're going to take a look at GTK and then DRIM GUI, which is probably the most widely used immediate mode GUI toolkit. And then we'll take a look at DVUI. So it should be a lot of fun. Go ahead and ask questions, and Loris will hit me with them as soon as we get there, as soon as you ask them.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you want to see some GUI stuff? Maybe.
Yeah. So shall we start then? I'm gonna transition to the view where people can see your desktop. So feel free to demo to your heart's content.
All right, let's do it. All right, so what I got here is I've got a very small GTK example. This is written in C. So we've got the code over here, and here's the GUI. All right, so it's pretty simple. We've got a label. It says "Hello, Alice," and an edit button. Click the edit button. So we change the label. Now we've got a text entry field. So I'll change this to Bob, and then hit done. All right, that's the whole thing.
Okay.
All right. So, any questions about that so far?
No, I think that's simple enough.
All right. So let's take a look at this. Let me see if I can make this any taller. Yeah, like there. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So let's go down to where main is. All right, here we go. So in GTK, it's very much callback driven. So we're going to set up a new application, and then we're going to connect a signal that says, I want you to call this function, this startup function, when the application gets run. And then it says, run the application. And then there's a little cleanup afterwards, and then you're done. Notice we totally give up all control over any main loop, rendering, input, anything. GTK handles all of that inside the framework toolkit. All right, so let's take a look at this startup function. All right, here it is. Okay, so we make a window, set the title, set the size of the window, and then here's how the layout works. We want a vertical box, so that's going to contain all the stuff. And then inside we have a horizontal box, so that's going to be this top stuff. And we're going to make a label that says hello with the name, set some margin stuff on it. And we can come back and talk about all this stuff in detail, but we're going to put the label inside the horizontal box. Then we're going to, okay, this is interesting. We're going to make some widgets, but not show them. So here's the label to ask for a new name when we click edit.
Yeah.
But we're not going to put it anywhere. And then we're going to make the text entry, but not put it anywhere. And here we're going to connect a signal. So when the enter button is pressed in the text entry, then we'll get a callback. And then we'll have the done and edit button down here, and we'll put that in the vertical box. And then we say, okay, we're done making widgets. Show the whole window. All right. So then what happens? So GTK is going to build up this widget tree, and it's going to hold on to it. That's kind of what it means to be a retained mode GUI. It's going to hold on to these widgets in its own data format and its own widget tree that we don't have direct access to. And it's going to hold on to those, and it's going to render whenever it wants. And then the way that we get control is whenever one of these callbacks gets called. So let's go look at the button click callback. All right, here's the button click. So when I click this button, what happens? So this function gets called, and now we have a choice. We need to track the state of the GUI. So we've got this, I'll go up to the top. Here's our two little bits of state. We've got the name and whether we are currently editing it. All right, so if we're editing, we're gonna stop editing. Otherwise, all right, so we got to maintain this bit of state, whether we're in the editing state or not. And now we need to deal with the widget swap that we need to do. All right, so we're gonna say, all right, I want to remove the label that we had. And we got this extra ref because GTK uses reference counting to delete widgets. So we want to remove this label without it being garbage collected. So that's what this GObject ref thing is doing. All right, and then we're gonna put the text entry box here, but we need to set the text to be the current name. So you got to go through this little dance where you get the buffer from within the entry, and then you set the text in the buffer to be the name. And now we're going to add the label and the text entry, and we got to remember to update the label on this button here. All right. Okay, so you can see how that works. And then this similar stuff if we want to stop editing, and then wrap it up in a function, because it might either get called from the button click, or it might get called from pressing enter in the text entry. So here's stop editing, and it's similar, right? We're kind of changing everything, get the text from the entry, update our name field, ref and remove these widgets, redo this label, and then reset the label on the edit field. All right. Anything weird so far? Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. Also, people in chat, so there's a delay. So I'm answering you directly because there's usually a delay with chat. But people in chat, if you have questions, feel free to ask them at any point in time. I'm going to relay them to David whenever it's a good moment. So yeah, if something doesn't make sense to you, feel free to speak up. Maybe try to prefix your question with a Q colon, or like highlight it somehow so that I can understand it's a question for us and not just you chatting. So somebody's asking, why did you choose the word edit for the box? I feel like that's not a super relevant question. It is just an arbitrary choice for the demo.
Yeah, just arbitrary choice to show that we have to update the label on the button if you need to.
Yeah.
So kind of, if we like zoom out a little bit and we say, okay, well, what's going on with this GUI? We only get to control the transitions. So we don't directly say what we want the state of the GUI to be. We say we set up one at the beginning, and then we control each transition.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
So it's kind of like maintaining state in two different places. So for example, here's this name, right? It's going to start as Alice, and then we might update it. But this is actually stored in two different places. We have our program's representation of it, but then also inside this text entry field, it's storing its own copy of the state. And then additionally, whenever we say done, it's also stored in this label.
Yeah.
And so a lot of retained mode GUI programming is making sure that these different copies of the program state are kept in sync. There's a great joke. What is it? Give a man a piece of state and he'll have one bug. Give him two pieces of state that have to be kept in sync and he'll have bugs for a lifetime. So this is sort of level one of retained mode GUI state management. And you can also see, look at all these globals that don't have anything to do with my program state. And the reason these are here is because I need access to them in these random callbacks. And you could wrap them up in a struct or something, and pass the struct as an extra pointer to the callbacks and stuff. But it's a very kind of I don't know, roundabout way of accessing this data and these widgets. And okay, so I talked about level one of keeping the state in sync, but there's another level that happens which is, what state is the widget tree in? So for example, this button, this is changing the state of the widget tree, but we also have that state in this Boolean field. And that's kind of a second level that has to be kept in sync. And I've definitely seen bugs over the years of a callback running, assuming that a certain widget is being shown or exists, and it doesn't. So there's kind of like two levels of state synchronization that have to be kept in sync. Big source of bugs. But I will say, so what do you get from this? What are the positives? The positives are, we don't have to manage a loop by ourselves. That can be a positive and a negative depending on, how much control you want. You don't have to manage the frame rate. So there's nothing in here that says, when do we redraw, under what conditions. The GTK just handles that. And input management. We never touch an input event of any kind. It's all kind of managed for you. All right, so I think that's a pretty good overview of this stuff. Laura, is there any questions about this that we want to hit right now?
No, I think it all makes sense. I think chat is following. You've been extremely clear in detailing it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I'm gonna move this one over here, and let's go to Dear I Am GUI. All right.
Yeah, chat is confirming all Gucci. I'm quoting verbatim.
All right. So this is in C++, and I'm recompiling it here in the background, so we'll give it a second to pop up.
Nice.
I might have to restart this from time to time. If I let it run too long, then I've had a couple of hangs. I'm sure that it's not a problem with the library itself. It's some weird combination with my machine. All right, but here's like an example to kind of similar thing in Dear I Am GUI. So a couple of quick observations. One is that there's this embedded window, because most things in Dear I Am GUI are designed to be debugging windows added on top of a video game or something like that. So most things end up in these floating windows, which is the sort of the normal case. All right, and we hit edit, and we can change this. It's all similar stuff happening. You notice this label out here, but we'll come back to that when we go through the code. And the fact that it's kind of maxed out at 60 frames per second, that's VSync. All right, so I'm going to try to prevent this thing from hanging, and let's look at the code.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go down to the main like normal. All right, so compared to the GTK code, you're going to notice kind of a lot more setup and teardown. So first thing that happens is you got to set up all the SDL background stuff. Make a window, make a renderer, and then we've got the I Am GUI stuff. So we got to set up some stuff, and this is mostly boilerplate. Kind of hook I Am GUI up to the SDL2. This is kind of like the glue layer between those two. Here's I'm making the size of the font big so that everything else looks big, so that we can see it easily. All right, and now here is the main loop of the program, and you notice we have complete control over the main loop. We're not giving up. Dear I Am GUI does not do this for you, so you have control over it. So here we're going to pull SDL for all the events, send them to Dear I Am GUI. If you get the special quit event, then we're going to bail out of the loop. This is kind of an interesting thing. You'll notice we were pegged at 60 frames per second because Dear I Am GUI does not have the concept of kind of waiting for events. Remember, it comes from a computer game background, so they want to run, at VSync the frame rate, and it's kind of a bug if you don't. So they're going to run at max frame rate no matter what. So this is kind of like a little extra thing where if the window is minimized, then wait for a little bit so you don't peg the CPU, and then just go through the loop again. Mm-hmm. Kind of like don't do anything, right? So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. All right, so then we're gonna do a frame. So you got to do this kind of little stuff that sets up the data structures within Dear I Am GUI that says, okay, we're gonna render a new frame, and then here's your normal stuff, and we'll go look at that. And then at the end of the frame, you have to say, okay, we want to render it. You got to do these various things. what's kind of interesting here is this render call is not pushing things to screen. It's actually producing like a big list of triangles. And then we clear the background in SDL, here, this render clear. And then here's where the triangles actually get sent to the GPU. And then here we got, we say, wait for vsync. And here I've explicitly called out, we're not waiting for any events here. We're just going to go as fast as we can. The only waiting that's going on is in this render present, SDL is going to wait for the vsync of the monitor, so we don't. That's why we're hitting like 60 frames per second instead of a couple hundred. And then if we exit the loop, we got normal app cleanup. All right, so if that makes sense, all right, then let's go look at the frame, which is this is the kind of thing, the kind of code that you would be working with kind of day to day if you're doing DRIM GUI stuff. All right, so here's my frame. We're gonna have a begin, and down here at the end, all right, let me get it all on the screen. Here's the end. So that gives you that floating window. This window, so you can have multiple of these windows. The idea is you might have a whole bunch of them giving you different views into various states of the game, different debugging information and stuff like that. All right, and then, okay, let me, okay, so we got begin and end. Let's skip over this for a second. Okay, so here's our state. If we're not editing, then this is the entirety of the code to show this string, right? This is what it means to be immediate mode. We don't have to manage the transition. We don't have to say, all right, find that widget we added before, that label widget, update the name field. We just say this every single frame, and you get hello Alice. And then if we change it to Bob, then we say hello Bob. And what happened there was that this name field just changed from frame to frame, and this is happening every single frame. Is that making sense, Loris?
Yeah, it does. So it's very different from what we were seeing before with GTK.
Yeah, it's kind of like you really gotta rotate, your mind 90 degrees to get into this style. All right, so if we're not editing, we're going to show that label, and if we are editing, then all right, I'll come back to this. We're going to say, here's a name, and here's our input text. That's what DRIM GUI calls it, a text entry. And I'm passing this extra flag, enter returns true. So if this call returns true, that means I press the enter button. So we say editing equals false, and then we come down here. Here's the button for whether we want to edit or not, and we change our state. And then here's the frames per second thing here. All right, so if that all makes sense, then let's talk a little bit about just what we're seeing. Like we'll zoom out again, right? Okay, so our function myFrame gets run every single frame. We don't have to explicitly manage which widgets are visible. We don't have to clean up after them. You'll notice here, if we're not editing and we show this, well, what happens if the next frame we come through and we are editing? We don't have to clean up at this. We don't have to say, this label is not being shown anymore. So that is a common thing. If you don't need a widget anymore, you just stop calling it and everything gets cleaned up for you. Yeah. So in terms of state management, here we've got the same bits of state for our program, but we don't have those globals for the widgets because we don't need to hang on to them from frame to frame, right? This is immediate mode. Everything happens in a single frame. All right. So then
there's a question from chat. So somebody is asking, when we talk about immediate mode, is it basically what you will hear as declarative UI?
That's a great question. It's very similar, but there can be um, differences in implementation. So, for example, if anybody is familiar with React, the kind of stuff, so in web programming, you have your normal DOM, and that is very much a retained mode kind of GUI. It stays there from frame to frame. But what you can do is you can layer this declarative thing on top of it, where we say, okay, I'm going to say, here's what I want the DOM to look like, and then it inside the framework, it kind of looks and says, does the DOM look like what you want it to look like? And
Yeah.
if it doesn't, then we're gonna pull stuff out and add stuff to make it look the same. So that's kind of like a declarative thing running on top of a retain mode thing. So it's kind of the same, but the implementation is very different.
Hmm.
And I would say probably the big difference um, is whether you have direct control over the main loop. If you have direct control over the main loop, then I would say that's definitely immediate mode. And if you are getting some kind of callback, and then you say, okay, based off that callback, here's a declarative list of what I want the GUI to look like, then I would say that's more sort of declarative. Like all of these things are a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah.
Um,
That's an interesting way of looking at it. If somebody had asked me, to be clear, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff. So I've been a user of DVUI. I've used it myself, but yeah, I'm sure there's people out there that have spent all their orders of magnitude more time than me thinking about it. That said, if I had to answer the question myself, the way I would look at it is kind of like it's like imperative, maybe more imperative in a sense than retain mode from this aspect, which maybe it's worth clarifying for the viewers. You mentioned that, for example, when you're doing emGUI : text, that's very different than GTK. But the point is here, and also correct me if I'm wrong, is that the way this works is that this happens every time, every frame. And every frame, when you call emGUI text, you're pushing somewhere on a stack, on an array list of some kind, I'm guessing on some kind of data structure, you're pushing a command that says to emGUI, render this text at these coordinates or somehow place it somewhere, right?
Yep, you got it. Yes. So that's a great segue. We can talk about what the layout is looking like. So all this stuff I
Yeah.
skipped before. So here's the spacer. All right. So this is saying, this is width and height. So I'm saying I want to, from the top left corner of this floating window, here I'll show it again. So from the top left corner of this floating window, I want to go down 10 units. And we can talk about sort of exactly what that means, but we want to go down a little bit, and then I'm going to render this text label. And DRI GUI has this very kind of like widgets stacked on top of each other, like exactly what you would want for a like debugging windows on top of an existing game. Like I just want to throw a bunch of stuff on the screen and just see it. I don't want to have to worry too much about exactly how this stuff is laid out. So you get this kind of thing. So here I say, okay, let me show that. Let me show that again. Okay, so let's go to where we're in the editing thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so we say name, and then I've got this text entry box, and it's on kind of, they're horizontally aligned. Well, how does that happen? So you call text, that produces this name ? And then you call this function same line. Right? So this
Wow.
is kind of like inside DRI GUI, after the text name, it's kind of got this cursor,
Yeah.
that's
Oh my
like
God. It's
here,
like,
and it moves it to the next line. And then when you call same line, it kind of like moves it back, right? So
it's
you can
like
put
terminal
something on the same
style.
line. Right.
Huh.
And like that is exactly what you want for the situation that DRI GUI is going for. But over the time, right, people have wanted to do more kind of fancy layout stuff, and so there's lots of like little extra tricks you can do. So this like align text to frame padding, that's what makes the name and this box, the like the baseline of the text, align in both cases.
Okay.
If I didn't have this, let's see if I can run this sucker since my
Oh, now it's revealed C++ time.
that's right. And part of this is that in immediate mode frameworks, typically all the code for the immediate mode framework is going to be kind of part of your thing, especially if you're DRIM GUI. That's the typical way is you're developing a game and you vendor or import all their stuff. So you got to compile everything together.
Oh, there we go.
So notice this, yeah, it's like a little bit not aligned.
Yeah.
And if you really press me for what exactly is going on, I couldn't really give you an answer, right? There's something about it's measuring the height of each thing in this line, and if you don't call this function, then it thinks there's nothing else is going to come later or something. Maybe it's stashing away some bit of state from frame to frame or something. So that kind of that's what's going on there. And then this push item width. Okay, so this is saying I want this text field to be a particular width, right? How wide is this thing going to be? And you don't put that as part of the input text call. It's kind of like out of band. We're pushing it on some stack and then we pop it afterwards. It's just like a different way of doing it.
Yeah, maybe there's one thing that, so since I know, as I mentioned, I'm a DVUI user. Maybe there's one thing that's worth mentioning for the audience. So immediate mode GUI is this general approach of stating every single frame what the layout should look like. So you don't concern yourself with transitions. You concern yourself with the state more, which I think it's a great way of describing it. But this specific layout engine, let's call it that way, that is unique to EMGUI. Like, it's very funky, and it doesn't have to be this way. Maybe it's not, and maybe there are reasons for it to work this way, and I'm sure there's like nice parts of it that maybe I would appreciate more if I use it more. But like immediate mode GUI doesn't imply that you need to have same line push item width. These are like curious choices that EMGUI, that this library is doing.
That's right. Yeah, the best way I could describe it is that Dear IM GUI is the most popular of this style, and this style came out of the video game development industry, and they were using it in a very particular niche. And so it definitely is targeting that niche. For example, like look at the fonts in here, right?
Yeah.
Like this is like a monospaced, what do you call this? Like a bitmap font or something, right? Which is fine because you're not expecting this to be like a normal application that's being shown to end users.
Yeah, fair. It's a style that maybe they even like more. Now that you mention it, I think the origin of these things is also seen in their choices. Like we looked at GTK earlier, and GTK had some CSS style way of defining borders, right, in the source code.
Yes, right.
While here they're going the complete opposite way.
Right. Yes, complete opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's another question. Sorry, from the audience that I think maybe it's worth taking a look now. So Foxney, who is the author of Pixie, the Pixie image editor in Zig, is asking. I think generally there's an assumption that immediate mode is a bad choice for applications / non-games. In my experience with VR EMGUI at least, performance seems good and not to kill battery life. Do you have an opinion from a performance perspective?
So it sounds like okay, let me say what I think, and then we'll see it. We'll see if that matches. So the typical complaint is that you have to run these things at a high frame rate. So notice it, like I'm not touching it, right? And it's going at 60 frames per second. So if you've got, a decent amount of UI stuff going on, then that's going to spend a decent amount of CPU and battery, just keeping the thing going, even if you're not touching it. I could be, in a totally different, I'm messing around with this application, but it's still going at 60 frames per second. And that's the typical thing, and it doesn't have to be that way. And DVUI works differently. So please put in the chat if I got you wrong. But hopefully, what we're about to look at answers that question. And to get at why that happens, it's because Dear IM GUI uses for their input layer, they use like a polling state-based approach. So if you want to know whether a mouse click happened, what they do is they say, we need to see a frame where the mouse was down, and then we need to see another frame where the mouse was up. So every frame, they just look at the current state. So you have to run at a high frame rate in order to see any kind of user input with a kind of decent otherwise you lose stuff, right? If you're going at 10 frames a second, then you can easily lose like a click, because you can click your mouse faster than 10 frames per second.
Yeah.
All right. I hope I answered that well, and that'll come up more when we look at the DVUI code. All right, you guys ready? Let's go. All right, so here's the code, and let's run it.
Yeah, can you make the window, maybe the NeoBeam window, a little bit wider so more stuff stays on a single line?
Yeah, it popped up on the wrong monitor. All right, here we go. Okay. So let me pull this over.
There we go. Nice.
All right, so here we go. All right, we'll move GTK over. Same deal, right? Hello, Alice. Edit. Change this to Bob. All right, so same functionality. Okay, so right away, like we were just talking about, look at the frames per second counter. If I don't move anything, right, it's not updating because we're not even running a frame. And now I'll move the mouse a little bit, and we're getting some low numbers because it's averaging the last 30 frames. And then if I start moving the mouse a lot, then we, ramp right back up to the VSync limit.
Yeah.
All right, so if anybody has questions about that, please ask them. And so let's take a look at the code. All right, so here's our 2 bits of state. We've got our name and our editing bit. Now let's go down to the main function. All right, so we're going to set up an allocator. We're going to make our window. I put this extra thing to make the demo window bigger. And you're going to see defer a lot. I like that pattern. And so get ready. And now we're going to make a DVUI window, which is a DVUI concept that maps one-to-one to an OS window. And then here's the main loop. All right, so we're going to have this setup. We're going to add all the events. Now in DVUI, we get all the events in a list, and then we propagate that list through all of the widgets that get called that frame. So that's the answer. That's how it's different than Dear IM GUI. Instead of just looking at the state of like the mouse every frame, we're going to explicitly get a list that might include, mouse down, mouse up, key down, key up, that kind of thing. Now we're going to clear the background. We're going to run our frame that we'll take a look at. And then we say we're going to end. And here's some stuff. And if anybody has questions about this is kind of like, kind of glue stuff, because you can run DVUI in either mode. You can either say, I'm going to run it as, debugging windows on top of an existing application or game, or I want to run it as the whole application. And so these kind of give you that flexibility. And then here's at the end. And so this is kind of the way that we don't peg the CPU. We say, all right, we're going to wait for an event with a timeout. And DVUI is going to give us how many micros to wait for. So we might wait indefinitely just for an event like a mouse move or something. Or if there's some animation going on or some thing that needs to update, then DVUI will say, let's go as fast as possible because we want to see that update as fast as possible.
Like animations, for example, running like a spinner.
That's right, like a spinner, or if you click a button, at the frame that you click it, so the frame that you press the mouse down, right, then you see the button as showing depressed. And then when you release the mouse, then we want to run another frame where we show the button as being released.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. All right, so let's go look at the code to show this stuff. So it's going to look similar to the DRIM GUI stuff. Here's the function that does the whole GUI. So we're going to make a horizontal box, and then we're going to do a defer. So that's why I've got it inside this extra scope, so we can put this defer. So everything else here is inside this horizontal box.
Yeah, let me unpack this a little bit more for people that might be watching that are not used to Zig. So
Yes.
defer, I think, is somewhat self-explanatory, right? It runs at the end. But the question is, at the end of what? If you are used to defer from Go runs defers at the end of the function. But in Zig, defers run at the end of the enclosing scope. So by adding a extra scope around the definition of HBox and its defer, this way David is basically using the scope to delimit what stays inside that box versus what stays outside of it. So yeah, the defer is basically go for it.
Yeah, so this defer here, this hbox.dinit, it's the same thing as if I wrote hbox.dinit at the bottom of this scope.
Yeah.
Just to restate what Laura said.
Perfect.
All right, so here we got, if we're not editing, then we're going to make a label. If we are editing, we're going to have the name label. And then we're going to have a text entry. And then we say, if enter got pressed on the text entry, then we're going to be done editing. And then we got the button at the bottom. All right, so anybody see anything weird going on, right? If you're not used to immediate mode programming, this looks really weird, especially like we change the editing state, but then you don't do anything else, right? Like what's going on there, right? Well, so inside the text entry, if enter was pressed, it's going to register that we need another frame. So we don't have to explicitly say, let's go another frame.
Yeah.
Very occasionally you do get that, and there's like a refresh function that you can call to say I want to go another frame, but usually don't have to, because we can usually the built-in widgets can detect when that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is here with the button. If this function call returns true, that means the button was clicked. So not only do we say, let's return true, but we also say we need to go another frame.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Also, I think there's a couple questions in chat that now it's a good time to start asking. So since you opened the door to questions about curious stuff in this code. So, or rather, I'll start by pointing out one thing. To be clear, these your functions are called the-init. So you call hbox and then you call hbox.the-init. That is a Zig convention that you adopted, but that the-init, to be clear, is the equivalent of emgui : end. I believe that was the word that they used.
Let me open that up so we can so we can look at the.
I guess my point is that normally the init in Zig parlance tends to mean you created something, maybe you heap allocated it, and now you want to destroy it. But in this case, this convention is being used to do begin and end. If we map this concept back to emgui.
A little bit. So let's take a look at it.
Yeah.
So in DRIM GUI, the begin and the end is specifically for the floating window.
Oh, it's specific to those. Okay. Other things don't have that.
Most things in DRIM GUI are a single function call.
Yeah.
So for example, with the text entry, and then you can usually pass like a bit field of options. So that's what, I can change the circumstances under which it returns true.
And
Whereas
to be fair,
for DVUI, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. Go for it.
In DVUI, typically you call a function and you get back, some kind of structure that represents that widget, and then you can interrogate it, ask if enter was pressed or something. And the other thing that's going on with the dinit is that there are kind of two levels that you can use DVUI on. There's kind of the low level thing where you say, let's see, how can I explain this? Let's go look at what this box function does. If that might answer you.
Yeah. Also, I think that the difference here is that hbox for you is the closest thing to the window in EMGUI, because that's the only in EMGUI that was the only thing that had a, I don't know what to call it, like a body that was inside of it, right? That's like
okay. That's a great point, and I missed that.
Yeah.
In immediate mode programming, generally, the parent context or the parent widget is implicit. So in this function, in this myFrame function, you notice I don't say what this horizontal box is inside, right? And that makes it more flexible because you could call this function anywhere. You could call it multiple times, right? That kind of thing. So if I made some other floating window and I wanted to put this stuff in that, I could put it there. So it gives you this flexibility, and that makes sense from if you're thinking about you're developing a video game and you're trying to debug some part of the code and you just want to like stuff a couple of GUI widgets in there to see what's going on. You don't want to have to thread some parent context through all of the functions and everything.
Yeah. So, I would say it's kind of like, I don't know if people are familiar with like Lua programming. That's how I think about it. It's like you have like this stack of things that you're defining and you push into them. And then when you call the init, you pop them out. So you pop out here when the hbox, the init runs, you pop out of the hbox.
That's right.
Right. And now you're inside the parent of hbox after hbox. And what that means depends on what the parent is. If the parent is another hbox, then you're a horizontal box, then you're on the right side of it. If it's a vertical box, you're below it. Or otherwise.
Exactly correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nice.
Oh, there's so many cool things that we could talk about. Okay. So let's look at what this box function does. Going back to this kind of double layer thing. Here's the box function. So we're going to create, we're going to allocate some memory to hold this box widget struct. And then we're going to call init on it, install it, which is kind of a DVUI thing that says, all right, I'm done messing with this thing. It's now going to be on a specific part of the screen, and it's not going to move anymore. And then draw the background, and then we're going to return it so we can do more stuff. So here's where the init happens. And sometimes you want to call this yourself, but for a lot of cases, you don't want to deal with kind of this stuff. So that's why there's this kind of two-layer approach. You can either deal with the widgets directly, or you can have these helper functions that kind of initialize the widget for you. Okay, hope that makes sense. So this is, and this kind of deals with zigs, where are the bytes, right? This shows you exactly, if you call these helper functions, there's an arena that's inside the window struct, and we're, putting all these widgets onto the arena.
There's a question from Neurosite. It says current window reads like a thread local variable.
Yes. So this is one of those things that like, maybe this is not the best, but this is where we are right now. So there's this current window function, and there's a global pointer to the current window. And that is valid. That pointer is valid between when you call this begin sets the current window, and then this end unsets it. And the reason it's done that way is to give you the ability to kind of dump this code wherever you want, and not have to thread this pointer to the current window through to everything.
Mhm.
Is that, the best design? Time will tell, but it seems to be working out okay so far. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. There's another comment from chat that says, I think this concept of pushing parents is best understood in languages that have a with/using block syntax. Does Zig have anything like that? No, Zig does not, but it does have defer. So yeah, we cannot have. I would agree that like using those Python calls them context managers, I believe. Well, those things would be perfectly nice for this use case, but you can make do with defer.
Yeah, and I don't know. Usually those things are happening at a programming language level, but the GUI is kind of a layer on top of that.
Mhm.
So it's not super obvious to me that that would necessarily make sense. Usually, like a with statement is saying, I want to take, um, some object and kind of call a bunch of functions on that. But that's typically not what we're doing here. We're saying, um, I want to make this horizontal box the
Uh,
parent, and then
oh,
I'm going to call other widgets, and then those
yeah.
widgets are going to implicitly know that they're going to get stuck inside this
Yeah,
box.
I think you're okay. I think now where the misunderstanding is, if you think of using as in I'll pull in unqualified identifiers into the current namespace, yeah, that's not it for sure.
Right.
Yeah, but the using is also used as a different operator in other programming languages that basically gives you the
Oh.
semantics of var hbox defer hbox, and with
Oh, I see.
always
Okay.
a scope attached to it. So, for example, Python uses that for file cleanup. You do with open file as f, and so that way the language guarantees that f.close will be called at the end of the block, and so within the block you can use f. So yeah, that feature is it's kind of what C is mimicking when it comes to macros, right? Because
Yeah.
we didn't show this, but like C GUI libraries oftentimes have these macro that uses a do while, I believe, right?
Right.
Yeah, they use do while syntax to basically make a poor man's context manager, basically. Yeah, in any case, sorry, David, please continue with what you were
Yeah.
showing.
So one thing, let me pull up the GTK code, because when Loris was originally asking me to make these demos, um, I wrote them, and then I was like, okay, let me try to actually just kind of transliterate them into Zig, and I got a little bit of the way there, but getting this callback stuff
Oh,
working in Zig
is that a
is like a
macro?
nightmare, because this thing is a macro that goes through other macros with like VARG stuff,
Yeah.
and like,
Oh,
oh man, just trying to figure out what the type of this thing should be is like
yeah.
is quite annoying.
I guess in
And
the community we have the general argument that we don't want to rewrite things if the original one, like if you want to spend the time to reinvent it, then go for it. But if the point is just porting blindly C code, usually it's not worth it. But in the case of immediate mode GUIs, I would say you in any case have a strong argument already from the beginning, because they do macro stuff that we can't do with Zig.
yeah, yeah, it becomes very weird.
Yeah.
Um, and you could just see kind of the style difference. Like look at this line, right? So I say GTK button new, but then I'm
Then you have to
casting the
cast it, right?
pointer to a GTK button star. Like, what's
Oh,
going on, right?
oh, I know. It smells like OP. Is that it?
Yes, right. So they're using this thing, right, where they take one struct and then they kind of stack them together so that based off of which pointer you're using, into the struct, you know, It's sort of like, the
Oh.
GTK widget and then GTK button stuff on the end of that, right?
Oh, okay. So it's clever OP. It's not pure OP. It's clever. Okay.
Right, right. This is the kind of thing that you see in C code that's trying to do object-oriented stuff, right? So then I cast it to a GTK button here, but then
Okay.
when I want to, set this h-align thing on it, I have to cast it back to a widget because that's what this function takes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why in this code you see these pointer casts almost on every line. And some of them are just straight up pointer casts, and some of them they have these kind of helper macro things that do the pointer cast for you. It's a style.
I see. Okay, I think there's a ton of questions about your DVUI source code, though. Is there anything else that you want to present, or do you want me to ask you questions from chat?
Let's go with questions, and then if we run out of questions, then we can go take a look at some interesting API stuff. But let's go with questions.
Okay, so there's definitely two big questions from chat. One is, what's up with @source? What is that for?
Oh, great. Okay, excellent question. Okay, so let me go back, and we're gonna pull up the Dear I'm GUI stuff, so we can look at it side by side. Okay, so this is all about the question: what if you have to maintain state from frame to frame? For example, this Dear I'm GUI text input. Okay, for it to detect that return has been pressed, it has to at least have seen 2 frames, because it needs to see a frame where the return button is down and then a frame where the return button is up. Where is that state being stored? And it's being stored somewhere down in the Dear I Am GUI library.
Yeah.
But how? Like, how does it know that? And that's what this stuff is, this label. So in Dear I Am GUI, every widget, you have to be able to produce a unique ID for that widget. And that ID has to be stable from frame to frame. That way you can attach little bits of state to it and you can
Right.
maintain it. And then if you don't see it for a frame, you can just throw it away. All right. So in Dear I'm GUI, the unique identifier is a hash of the label. Now, okay, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
what happens in DVUI? We take @source and we hash it. So you get the unique ID for this hbox from @source, which is going to be unique to this line in the source code. Okay, so that's relatively straightforward, but I can tell you guys are, people are already thinking, well, what if there's collisions, right? So in the Dear I Am GUI case, what if I want to have 2 widgets that have the same label? So they have this extra little thing. You can put 2 hash marks and then whatever you want, and that will get hashed into the label, but it will get cut off for when you see the it won't be displayed. All right. Well, what about in DVUI, right? What if I'm running my frame twice?
Yeah, or like you're
Or in a
printing
loop.
text in a for loop.
That's right.
Where the source
Yeah.
location is going to be the same, right?
And so it's a pretty rare case, but then you can do this ID extra, the for loop I or something, right?
Yeah, like the iteration index, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually you only have to use that in a loop, because the @source gets hashed, but it also gets hashed with the parent's ID. So as long as my frame, if you were going to call it multiple times, as long as it was being called inside of different parent widgets, then everything would work out.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where, Loris, you'll like this. It's kind of like the debugging experience matters. So let me.
Not only will I like this, I have liked this already because I have messed up my DVUI code.
So here's the
yeah.
Here's the. I hope this is kind of big enough for people to see.
Yeah, it
Here's
is. It is.
the demo. And if you go down to debugging, right, and we say duplicate ID, like what happens when you accidentally make a duplicate ID? And we can detect that, and we put, red outlines around things, and then we log in the thing. Hey, you got a duplicate widget.
Yep.
You might need to pass this ID extra, and then a link to some documentation about it.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Any what other questions we got?
Yeah, we have more. So another one is, what is in general then the layouting model that DVUI uses? So we saw HBox, that implies the existence of a VBox. What else is there?
Got it. Yes, perfect question. So it's the tried and true boxes within boxes layout model. So most things are going to be, horizontal boxes and vertical boxes with other stuff packed inside of them. So let's take a quick look at the demo. Here, layout. All right, so here we've got boxes, vertical boxes, horizontal boxes. Down here we've got a flex box. So if I, change it, I hope that is making sense. What's going on there? We're laying out these children, and then they overflow to the next line.
Yeah.
And then in general, like if you're inside of a box like here, right, then if you're smaller than the containing box, you can control exactly where you show up in there, and you can expand in both directions in order to fill up the available space. If anybody has any questions about details about how this works, go ahead and ask them, and we can go through it.
Yeah, let's see. Let me find some other questions in the meantime. So if you created a button, for example, how does the DVUI know that it was clicked already? Does it match it with the previous frame somehow? You did answer that, yes.
Yep. We squirrel away a little bit of state from frame to frame.
Yeah. Are there any specific kinds of applications where you think DVUI shines, and conversely, where maybe DVUI would not be a good choice?
Whew, that's a pretty big question. That's hard to answer. I'm trying to think of, super corner case GUIs, right? Like some super embedded thing where there's only a couple of widgets ever. But you could definitely do that. Man, that's hard. I don't know, Loris. You got any opinions there?
I think that it's worth experimenting with this stuff. Maybe maybe you will find some people that have opinions about this. I know people that don't like EMGUI. I know people that love EMGUI, and so if you ask one, they will say, never, and the other people will say, always. I don't know. Maybe sometimes you need OS integration of some kind, and so using the native OS toolkit, it's a better choice if you really need that native look and feel. Other than that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, certainly if you need some kind of native, super big native integration, then you want to use whatever the native toolkit is. Generally, just the question of the style of whether it's immediate mode or retained mode is going to come down to personal preference. A lot of the reason that people are kind of attracted to immediate mode toolkits is that they give you you keep ownership of the main loop. I mean, that was one of the big things that pushed me towards developing DVUI in the first place. Was I was writing a GTK podcast app, and oh man, it was I just felt like I was fighting against the toolkit instead of going with it. And one of the things that we touched on a little bit is that because of the implicit parent that happens, the unit of reuse in immediate mode toolkits is generally functions. So if you want like a little bit of UI state, like a little like a little piece of the UI, and maybe in certain cases you want it here, in other cases you want it here, sometimes you want it in both places, and that just becomes a function you call in two places, as opposed to in a retain mode toolkit, you'd have like a function that produced that little bit of state, and you pass in like the parent, and then you have to wire up all the callbacks, and then if it ever showed up twice on the screen, then you might need to know in which, like in the callbacks, in which context you were. So managing that becomes really annoying.
Yeah. Okay, there's a couple interesting more questions. I'll start with a small one, and then we'll get into the bigger ones. So, one is, how do you recommend handling nested loops? Like, the idea is you have two nested loops. They each have their own iteration variable, but then you only have one ID extra.
Oh, okay, good question. Normally, it's not a problem because in the outer loop, you're making a new parent. So let me just write some like
Yeah.
pseudocode. So here's the outer loop, and then here's the inner loop. And then out here, we would say, like, let's have a VBox out here, right? So we say, here's a box, and I'll set the, here we'll say, well, this would be like this.
Yeah.
All right. And then I say defer hbox.dinit. Here we've got our inner loop. All right. And now let's put a button in here. So we'll grab this button code. Come on, fingers. All right. So we had to put ID extra onto this hbox because we're calling it in a loop. This button, we also need to put the ID extra on. All right, so let's put it on here. Extra is equal to Y. All right, and then we're good. Why? Because this button, the 10 of these buttons that are going to go, their ID is going to be hashed together with the ID of their parent, which is going to be this guy, which has this ID extra already on it. Hope that makes sense.
It does. What if you don't have the parent?
Yeah, so there are ways you can do this. Let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to remember the exact. Let's see. Yeah, so you can do this kind of thing where if you need a unique ID, like this is exactly what DVUI does under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
We get whatever the implicit parent is and extend the ID by the source parameter and the ID extra.
Okay, so that way you can hook basically into the hashing system that way.
That's right. Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, and part of the kind of philosophy of DVUI is just to expose everything. So I don't try to hide, any of the guts of the program. Like, that's one of my pet peeves. Like you find some function buried in the toolkit that is exactly what you need, but it's not public or you can't call it for some reason. And so like almost everything in DVUI is public and callable. Not always documented, but I'm working on it.
Can you talk about how animations work in EM GUIs?
Sure. In like Dear IM GUI, it's going to run it at the frame rate it gets. So what an animation looks like in that is just you're going to get like 60 frames per second. You can call a function that tells you the frame rate you're running at, so you can calculate that. But in general, you just say, okay, look, each frame I'm going to show the next little bit of the animation. in DVUI, because we do the variable frame rate stuff, the spinner or other animation thing has to say explicitly that it's in animation. So we've got this spinner function. So let's go look at it. Let's see. I need to find, there we go. All right, let's look at this. Okay, so this widget data thing is like common widget data. It gets used by all the widgets under the hood. And then, all right, here's the animation stuff. So we say, okay, I've got an animation, and the animations are defined by like a starting and end value that you can interpolate between. So we say the start value is 0, end value is 2 pi, and we want to go for this many micros, so 4.5 seconds. And then we say, okay, if we had an animation, we have to ask this because we don't know that the spinner even existed last frame.
So this is another component that requires that knowledge that needs to survive between frames.
That's right. So we say, if an animation does exist, and we've got this string, because you could have multiple animations for the same widget ID. If we've got an animation, then we say if it's done. So if there's going to be a single frame where this animation, it's like the last frame of the animation. So if it's done, because this is a spinner, we want to keep going. So then we say, let's reset the start and end time and call the animation function, which tells DVUI, hey, this is an animation. We need to keep this from frame to frame. We do a linear interpolation between the starting and the end values. And then down here is where we use this angle. Where am I? Here it is. All right, so I hope that kind of makes sense. I'll leave this code up in case
maybe
people have.
You can show it running so that people can see how it looks like in the demo.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Where is my? Is that? Oh right. Okay. Let me stop that and go back to the main DVUI. All right, let's find animations. Here we go. All right, so we got, like wiggle a button around, that kind of stuff. So here's the spinner, right? And the spinner is the kind of animation that says we want to go as fast as we can. So you'll notice we're maxing out the frame rate here. But what if you don't want to go as fast, right? All right, so I'll close the spinner. Let's look at this clock. So I'm not going to touch anything, right? So this is trying to schedule a frame at the top of each second, and so we're doing a pretty good job. We're hitting within sort of 1 millisecond into the second, and you see this estimate of frame overhead. So if you use the DVUI functions begin wait and wait time, it kind of gives you this extra little thing where DVUI internally maintains an estimate of how much extra time was spent outside of the DVUI loop. And so when something in DVUI wants to run another frame at a particular time in the future, it uses that estimate to try to get try to hit that time, more precisely.
Makes sense. Let me see if there's other questions. So Blaricat is asking, when it's idle, does it sit at 0% CPU/GPU?
Yes, if it's idle, it sets at 0. What the code that you're sitting in is going to be some backend function. So if you're using the SDL backend, it's going to be wait for events with a timeout. The timeout is infinite, so it just waits until you get some event, some user input event.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see other questions. So you've shown the demo in this SDL standalone example, But you also have a web demo, right?
Oh yeah, let's take a look. All right, so here's the awesome website based on Zine from Loris, and we'll click web demo, and here it is. So got all the same stuff going on here, and it's using WebGL2 as the backend, and it's making like one HTML canvas, and everything happens inside that HTML canvas.
Nice.
Yeah. So if anybody, I've been surprised at how much people love the web demo, and are trying to use it, to do real stuff. So it's definitely something that we're trying to, that I'm trying to spend time on to make it better. A lot of people report that the text is more blurry in the web demo on low DPI devices because we use free type to rasterize the glyphs, and free type is just a real pain to get compiling for WASM. And so on the web, we use STB true type. And STB true type is fantastic, but it does not do hinting. Hinting is, I found out that hinting means a lot of different things to different people. So what I mean by that is the true type hinting, where if you're rasterizing a glyph onto a relatively large pixels or low DPI thing, there's extra instructions in the true type specification that say, okay, you've got like a stem for like an eye, and we're gonna like hint it or like move it over so that it falls exactly on like a pixel boundary or something like that. So you get much crisper glyphs in a low DPI scenario. So there are things we can do there, and we're definitely gonna look into them. Definitely.
Yeah, I think there were like a few different people that were looking into this general space independently. Andrew was looking at learning how to rasterize fonts, I think, on his own. Then Ghosty has its own research branch going on. Johnny Marler also recently was looking into some of this stuff because he was working. I think the reason why he was looking into it is because he wanted to make a GUI front end for Flow. So Flow is a TUI text editor by Neurosite.
Yes.
And I think Johnny wanted to make like a GUI for it, where basically the TUI application stays TUI, but then instead of like, it's like what you put in front of it's not a terminal emulator, it's something more custom made. So yeah, I'm confident that there will be some interesting developments in the Zig space going forward.
Yeah, text is sort of like a tar pit that you never get out of. So all right, here are the basic widgets. All right, chat. Which of these widgets takes more development time than all of the rest combined?
I'm gonna wait for answers for this
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I'm
Let's
curious. Marler was making a new font format. Okay, Johnny, as usual, like just rabbit holing.
Oh, right. Yes.
Like
Yes, that's what's going on.
going too deep every single time.
Yeah, he's going he's going into orbit.
Yeah. Okay, so people are saying Neurosite says text entry. So Lost Marble Dev sliders. 1Q Echo says link. What does link mean? Oh, like the link thing. Okay.
Oh, like the link.
Right, there's a link element. Yeah, I forgot. I would say the radio text. Grey Hatter says drop down ? Rocco Rager says multi-line label.
Okay. All excellent guesses. The answer is the text entry box. And the reason the text entry box is so bad is because it looks so simple. You just type stuff into this box. Like, how hard could it be? Oh, wait, there's scrolling. There's all this scrolling stuff inside of a text entry, and there's highlighting text, and there's all these keyboard shortcuts for how to select text.
There's a cursor.
Oh man, yeah, there's a cursor, right? That doesn't show up anywhere else. That's why there's we got this whole thing about text entry stuff here. Having scroll bars and selecting stuff. Oh man, it's a whole thing. And then to be able to like click on text, right? You have to be able to measure all of the glyphs so that you know where the click happened, and it just text is just this crazy thing, because you're not even
Yeah.
guaranteed that an individual glyph fits within like a certain box, right? You get this reference box from the font, but the glyphs could be bigger than that. Like, who knows? It's one of those cases where there's no way to get it like perfectly correct. You can only kind of do a reasonable job.
Hmm.
And for example, like um, I actually got a bug report from Andrew about missing support for various keyboard shortcuts in text entry boxes. And so I went looking, like, where are these things documented? And it turns out nowhere. Like, so for example, if you, all right, chat, here's my cursor is at the beginning of a word. What happens if I hold down Control and press the right arrow key? All
Okay,
right.
this is gonna be awesome. By the way, can you see chat, or do you want me to relay it or
No,
something? You can't. Okay,
I
cool.
can't. Okay, so
Okay,
probably got it, right? It
they're
goes by a word,
wait,
right? You
yeah.
guys seeing this?
So people, let's see what people were saying. One word to the right, select the whole word, end of the line. Okay, so most people say one word. Some say end of the line.
Okay. And that makes sense because, like, if you want to have keyboard shortcuts, they're going to be different depending on whether you're on like a Mac or a PC,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, in trying to fix this bug, right? I thought, well, that's fine. I can make keyboard shortcuts just be a compile time thing. Oh, wait a second. What about the web? The web doesn't know until runtime what platform it's on, right? So now, you gotta have all these things. Okay, so control goes by one word. I'm on a PC right now. Okay, control goes by one word. All right. Now, if I hold down control and shift at the same time and press to the right, what happens? All right, it selects. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to select this part of the word. Okay, what happens if I hold down control and press right arrow?
Oh, I have no idea. Let's see what people say. I'm
Ready?
gonna wait for people to say something. Add selection to the end of the word. Extend next char. Select to the end. It depends where you let go of the selection. No
Okay,
selection,
well,
just the cursor to the end of the word. I have no idea. Now I'm curious. Which is it?
yeah. So this is fantastic because I guessed all of those things when I was trying to do this because there is no document that tells you what should happen.
Oh, Neuroside,
If
who
you
seems to know this stuff, says unselect and move to the next word.
Oh, very, very close. Okay, so I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Control right. It unselects and moves the cursor to the end of what was selected.
Okay.
All right. And if you go and look up, like, Apple's official keyboard shortcuts, right? All it says is if you hold down control or command in that case, it moves by a word. No, you know, nobody has all these little things. But if you go and you test in different environments, they all generally behave the same. So I think this is an example of a case where everybody copied everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
and there are all these like little tiny edge cases that you only find out by people
Complaining
filing bugs
about
that
it.
say, hey,
Yeah.
you missed this thing. You know,
Yeah.
like another thing in multi-line, because it can wrap, right? You can have my cursor is at the end of the line, right?
Yeah.
And now I press to the right and it goes to the beginning of the line. Is that the same byte index into the text? And yeah, there are cases where you can get that. And so you actually have to have this extra bit of state that says, for a given byte, if that byte index happens to be on the very end of the line and it got wrapped, do you want the cursor to be at the end of the line or at the start of the previous line? So yeah, I kind of have this love-hate relationship with the text entry widget. It works really well. Like, like, so check this out. All right. So we've got a vertical,
By the way,
we've got a
sorry.
vertical.
Sorry,
Yeah, we got.
this is really funny. So
All right.
Neurosite is the author of Flow. Now he's saying he's right, and I think I have a bug in Flow. So he has behavior in his editor that he's now realizing isn't what it should be.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So good.
Yeah, so you're right. It happens to everybody.
Yeah, happens to everybody. And this is kind of like what GUI library stuff is like all about. Is like it's just sweating these like super tiny details,
Yeah.
because when you use a GUI, if it gets all these things right, it will just feel normal.
Yeah.
But if they're wrong, you might not even know what's wrong. They just feel like
it feels
something
broken.
weird is going.
Yes, it feels
Yeah.
broken to me. Yeah.
Like here, I've got this this text entry that's vertically scrolling. All right, so I'm going to click down. I'm going to hold down with my mouse, and I'm moving my mouse up. All right, what's supposed to happen when my mouse hits the top of this widget?
You
right?
scroll
I'm going to move it a little bit more.
Right, you scroll up, and you keep
Oh.
selecting.
Oh, there we go. So
you scrolled a lot.
It scrolled. Yeah.
Okay, well, it scrolls. Okay. Oh, now
Yeah. So
normally. Okay.
yeah, part of that's just my my jittery hands, right?
Uh-huh.
If you go really fast, it'll go.
Yeah. Right. The more you go far, the faster it needs to scroll.
Right. The faster it goes, and managing that in a variable frame rate environment.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now I'm gonna make this window smaller. So now we have this internal scroll bar and this external scroll bar. Right. So now we've got nested scroll environments. So if I scroll this one, it's knowing to scroll this scroll environment, but not the external scroll environment. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to put my mouse cursor just in the middle of this thing, and I'm going to scroll the scroll wheel. Okay. So here I'm scrolling down in the scroll wheel. All right. Whoa. Right.
Yeah. So it needs to go. So you can't handle scroll events like eagerly. They need to go down to the deepest widget, and then if it's not consumed by that widget, it needs to bubble back up.
Right. Yes. So you have to have this idea of widgets handling events, and they might want to handle them before their children, and they might want to handle them after their children. And so in DVUI, you kind of get both those options.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, with the mouse wheel, the big scroll area gets run first, because it has to be the parent for all the stuff inside. So for the mouse wheel, we have to say, okay, I don't want to handle this event right away. I want to handle it after all my children get a shot at it.
Yeah.
So then this internal one, it says, okay, I don't have any children, so I'm going to handle it immediately. But if I happen to be at the bottom of the range of the scroll, then I want to kind of bubble that event up to possible parents to handle. So just tiny detail after tiny detail.
Yeah. So I have a question then, kind of to wrap up this exploration here. If I understand correctly, there is some things that have to be framework wide, like the concept that of permanence of a widget. You need to be able to track the same widget across two different frames so that you can understand if a button was pressed, like some things like that. But if I understand correctly, most of what you showed me here for this text box is complexity that it's mostly inner to this text widget. Most of it is not something that reverberates all across the DVUI. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. So, the reason why I'm pointing this out is because what I find interesting, or rather, what it was a minor interesting realization that I had when I started using the DVUI, that isn't specific to DVUI. It's about like EM GUIs or like GUI frameworks in general, is that at the end of the day, what you get from the framework is some of these overarching decisions and some pre-baked widgets that encode behavior that is desirable by users, that is a pain in the ass to implement yourself, but that then if you need something different, you can still do it. Like if you're unhappy for some reason with the behavior of this text box, you can always copy paste it and customize it.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the reasons that Dear I Am GUI has been such a success is that it ships with this giant demo window. And so that's why DVUI does exactly the same thing. So this demo window here, has code that uses every single part
Yeah.
of DVUI. And so if you want to, do something, you just look in this window for the thing that kind of is what you want, and then go find that part of the code and copy paste. Definitely.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, I have one last question from chat about rendering stuff, and then I think we can talk about maybe some other features of the UI that you want to mention.
Sure.
So this question I think has been asked a couple of times in slightly different flavors, but what about, for example, not rendering stuff that is not visible on screen because of scrolling? What do you have in that sense? How much can you like avoid rendering stuff that is invisible? How much do you have to anyway?
So there's the concept of the clipping window, or the clipping rectangle. And that is how you, let me think of a good example. So here, so on the right side of this window, there's this text at the bottom. The text entries in this section are left aligned. When I pull this window up, it's disappearing like halfway, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And like, how come we're not seeing that bleed out below this window? And it's because we set the clipping rectangle to be, this window.
So it's a GPU feature?
Yeah, it's a generally any rendering thing will have a clipping rect, or sometimes it's called a scissor rect, where you say, this specific rectangle on the screen is only the pixels that are inside this rectangle do I want to be painted to.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. But I think you also had an interesting widget for where it's not just this, like it's like you have like an endless scroll, kind of like a chat thing, right? In which case you need something more coordinated to like you have like this endless chat thing, and you need somehow to have like a data fetching.
So if you so this is kind of getting into the weeds, but this demo I put together to try to exercise the idea of, what if you had an endless chat like this, and you wanted to, from one frame to the next, you might add more history to it or take away history and stuff. And so that's what all these buttons do, right? Like I want to add stuff above stuff above this. And it just showed up because the way that the scrolling offset works is it's an offset from the top. But what if I want to add above without scrolling, right? And so you do this, and you
Nice.
can go look at what these buttons are doing to find out what to do there.
This is another like big widget, I believe, that people care about a lot. Well, maybe not everybody, but like I in my history, I remember looking at this stuff in Swift in the past, like what Apple was offering me. It's one of the big ones. I think it's interesting to see how an immediate mode version of it differs from a retain mode of it, because the retain mode, at least the one from Apple that I remember, like it was very heavy with abstraction. You had to provide a like data fetcher adapter, like
Right.
like item visualization, context factory adapter. Like it was very fancy.
Yeah. So for example, same thing here. Let's just for variety here, like I'll launch the icon browser. All right. So we got all these icons in this giant list. but like we're not rendering the entire list on every frame, right?
Yeah.
So there are kind of two things you can do. One thing is you can say, if I know exactly what should be on the screen, then I can show just what's going to be on the screen. So like with the scrolling widget, you can ask, you can say, you know, sorry, that's the wrong thing to say. You can just explicitly say like, here's how much stuff in total I'm going to have. But then I'm not going to render all of it, right? I'm only going to render what's actually in the viewport. Where was I going with this?
As another example of having the concept of like data fetching, and I'm not sure that's what was the other form.
Right.
Yeah.
So like if you were trying to do this in GTK, what would happen is you have to have this special widget that says, okay, I'm going to manage the viewport. And when a new thing is about to come onto the viewport, then you get this callback and you create this widget.
Oh yeah.
And then like add it, to the list. And then when
Yes.
something disappears, you get another callback that says, hey, we're done with this thing. So you got to clean up after it. And so, you have this dance going all the time.
And you heap allocate like crazy also.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of fun stuff. Okay. So you were talking about the immediate mode stuff. And one of the things that I'm trying to do with DVUI is push the immediate mode API as hard as we can. So somebody talked about the drop down earlier. So let's look at this drop down here.
Yeah.
That's too far. Okay, here's a normal drop down. All right, just like totally normal stuff. Okay. All right, here's the advanced drop down. Okay, now check this out. Okay, we've got an icon, and then it says advanced drop down. I click it. Okay, we've got an icon with text. Got some just text. We got an image above text. Okay, this is all stuff. I clicked it. But now it says something else, right? I clicked image above text, but it says drop down choice 2. All right, let's go look at that code because this is pretty interesting. Drop down choice. All right.
Yeah.
Let me kill this. All right, so here this is my drop down advanced thing. All right, so you make a drop-down widget, install it. So install means I'm done configuring this thing. We're going to stay in the same part of the screen, and now we're going to do children. All right, and I say, okay, here, if the drop-down is not dropped, like right now, what do you want to put in there? And so you just say, I want a horizontal box, I want an icon. And then depending on what choice it is, I'm going to put a label in there, and then this little triangle here at the right-hand side, and then we're done. Okay?
Yeah.
And then down here it says, okay, if the dropdown is dropped, I'm going to tell you what is in this dropdown here. Okay? I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to add a choice.
Yeah, just so that we're clear, people, for clarity, this is not the internal implementation of the dropdown. This is an example. This is usage code. This is how you would use the advanced dropdown as a user. Because previously we saw install in a different context. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah, sorry. This is kind of the lowest level that you can use the dropdown API. So if you wanted to do a drop down, but with all the knobs and whistles and stuff, this is the kind of code you would do.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the drop down is dropped, I say, okay, I want to add a choice. I'm going to do a horizontal box. This thing about style accent is whether the background is going to be blue. And then I say, okay, I'm going to have the aircraft landing icon, and then the icon with text, and then if they clicked on it, right, that's what this active rec means. If they clicked on it, close the dropdown and set the choice. Okay, so that's all for this first entry in the dropdown. And then we got similar thing. Add a choice with just a label, just text. Add another choice that's got a vertical box this time. the zig favicon and the image above text label.
Yeah.
Same thing. Okay, now, so if we look at this code, right, this is so different from a normal drop-down widget. A normal drop-down widget is, I'm going to make a drop-down widget, and here's the array of labels, of text strings that I want you to show, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but here, it's like the purest immediate mode, right? You say, here's a drop-down, and I'm just going to give you one at a time all of the entries in there. And I hope that gives you kind of a flavor of like
Yeah.
kind of pushing the immediate mode API to places
Yeah.
that I've never seen before.
That makes sense. And I think it also, you don't showcase this in this example because you're purposely showing like 3 different ways, like each entry is a different one. But it also shows that if you want to have, while in the case of like a retain mode GUI, normally you have these objects that you have to implement and then they have to fulfill interfaces, and then you have like these callbacks, you have to heap allocate. In this case, you're still like, your composition unit is still the function. Like if you wanted, you still have the option of using a function to render your entries in here, which is just a normal function.
Just a normal function, yeah. So you could call some function that says that, looks up the choices from a database table and gives them to the GUI one at a time, right?
Yeah.
You could do a lot of different things.
That's nice.
But the idea that the drop-down widget itself is not imposing a restriction on the shape of the data that you're using to back it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I think at the end of the day, I think that all this stuff ends up giving you like a big payoff when it comes to performance. Because all that we've seen up until now, like there was some init thing where you mentioned you were allocating a widget information, but I also saw that .arena, so you are putting stuff in an arena locator. You have this concept of a frame where you can reset the arena locator for every frame. So that is very different from, I have my items, going back to your point about data duplication, I have my item, and then I need to allocate the representation of this item that works well with the drop down or the endless list adapter, and then it's all over the place and duplicated.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes it very hard to get outside of the, what exactly the person who wrote that widget thought you wanted to do.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have 2 more questions. Okay, and then I'm gonna stop, I swear, because otherwise we're gonna take forever. People keep asking good questions. People, stop asking good questions, please. No, I'm joking.
Oh, okay. And of course, I should say, okay.
Yes.
Anybody who wants to ask questions, let's see. If you go to the community tab, right? Show up on Discord, right? I hang out in the GUI dev one. I'll answer any questions you have. So if we don't get to it today, definitely show up there.
Yeah. So okay, 2 final questions because like one is from Neuroside. He was extremely excited and said, I have to write. I so have to write a DVUI front end for Flow. His question was about theming. What does theming look like in DVUI?
Okay. Let's see. All right. So let's see what we've got for themes. So we've got some built-in themes. And I am truly indebted to the person who did all the work to add these themes. It wasn't me. And I am totally blanking on their name right now. I apologize. So we have those built-in themes. Okay, so what can you change in a theme? Source theme. All right, so here is what's in a theme. You've got a bunch of colors for text and fill of various things, a bunch of fonts, and then a couple of kind of pre-baked styles. This options struct is the thing that gets passed at the end to kind of every widget. So this H box right here, this last part is an options. And we can go look at that, but it's got, all the kind of layout options, and it lets you override, fonts and colors. If you wanted to, you can override like the border and the padding, the margin, the corner radiuses, and stuff like that. So in the theme, you generally change colors and fonts, and then for specific like sizes of widgets, it happens on a widget by widget basis. Some people have also used the ability that the defaults for the widgets are so here's the button widget, and it's a var. So on startup, some people will modify the defaults for some of the built-in widgets.
Makes sense.
Theming is definitely one of the places where like we have some stuff. I get the feeling that we're, it's probably not where we're going to be, long term. There's definitely some other things that people want to be able to do that we haven't gotten to figure out yet.
Makes sense. Okay, so here's a fun question from Scott. How do you handle clipping rectangles while also having rounded corners?
Every once in a while, you see a mistake. So if you look right down here in the corner, you can see that's what's going on is that the rounded corner of the floating window is being drawn on top of by the non-rounded corner of the child widget. And so far, we just treat that as, a normal bug that you gotta fix. So you got to make sure that if, the child widget has the same corner radius as the parent, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. Okay, very, very last question. So the library stores some state associated with widgets between frames. What does the storage look like? Does each widget define widget type define a state that gets stored? How does it work?
Excellent question. All right, let me close some of this stuff. All right, so for some things, DVUI stores them specifically. So for minimum sizes, the window object just stores minimum sizes keyed by the ID because every widget needs a minimum size. But what about like a widget where you have some like one-off stuff? So we have these functions called data set and data get. And these things take anything you throw at them, and using Zig's comp time type introspection, we sort of take like the byte, like the slice of bytes that represents that type, that data, and we store that internally as just a byte string. And then when you ask data get, so here we go, we say for this widget ID with this extra key, I want the data stored for this, and it should match this type. And if you're compiling in debug mode, then we store the string description of the type and compare it to make sure that you get out the same, you asked for the same thing that you gave.
Yeah.
Let me see. Is there a thing I can to show how that gets used? Data get. So here we go. So this is a dialogue. So we didn't talk about this, but DVUI has this special kind of more retained mode for dialogues that you want to show, because a lot of times with a dialogue, you want to call a function that says, hey, show this dialogue, but we're never coming back to this part in the code. I want to show like an error dialogue, and I want to fire and forget, right? And so DVUI has this place where you can just say, here's a dialogue, store all this information, show it as long as the person wants to see it, and then get rid of it. So if we're showing this dialogue with this ID, go and get a bool with this name. And in this case, we say or else unreachable, because if you're showing this dialogue, if this function is being called, this thing better exist. But let's see if we can find one that is a little different. So here we go. So this is, we're animating one of the windows. So let me find the example here. Here, like this thing. So if you watch this dialogue, it kind of animates down and up. And here we say, all right, I want to store this size. So I want to get it. And if it exists, give it to me. And otherwise, we're going to do this other thing. So you tend to, so we have a special kind of Zig superpower, like, arbitrary data thing where you can squirrel away arbitrary things keyed by an ID and a string.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, that was great. Let's see. Are there any other features of the DVUI that you want to mention? Like, we don't have time to go too deep into everything, but like, I don't know, other interesting things that other frameworks don't attempt.
Oh man, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But you know what? I will end with a quiz for chat. I'm going to show something to the camera, and you're going to tell me what it is. All right.
Okay, give me a sec. I'm going to put you up with a big camera focus. There we go. Now you're super big.
Okay. All right. And this is the kind of origin story of how I got into this thing. All right. Who knows what this thing is? All right. It's going to be hard to see. Here's a hint. There are 3 sliding switches on this side. Anybody?
I don't see guesses yet. Yeah, I think they need a bit more time.
All right.
No idea.
No idea.
I mean,
all right.
It looks like a phone. One of the Linux phones, I would imagine.
That's right. It's one of the Linux phones. Which one? If I hold it up, maybe you can see.
So the guesses are Librem 5, Purism.
Yes. This is a Purism Librem 5. So I got this a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to use it as a daily driver. And the software is not there. So I said, well, I can fix that. And so I said, what's the easiest way I can get into this? Well, I didn't like the podcast player app. So I said, well, I'll make a podcast player app. How hard could it be? So I started making it in GTK using the there's a GNOME has a special thing for like audio for like media playback, like GStreamer. Yeah. And I just like got kind of down into that, and then I was just like, and at the same time I was also writing like a video game, like a LAN party video game, and so I had some exposure to kind of immediate mode stuff. And so I was like, all right, I'll just like do that, and like, how hard could it be? And, here we are now. But all right, here we go. Round 2. What is this? Anybody?
Yeah, we see the letters.
Yep.
Is this a newer Fair phone?
Close. This is a Theory Labs FLX1, I believe is the name of it. So after being disappointed with this, I really wanted to use this. I got this, and I'm very excited about this one. I've only had this for a couple of months now, but let's power this thing on. This is the podcast player that I have been writing in Zig using DVUI. And one of the things to point out about this is that touch is working. So DVUI has all of the bits needed to support both normal keyboard and mouse and also touch stuff.
So you actually succeeded.
Yeah. So this is super cool. Okay, and I could not have done this without Zig. This phone, right, is like running an ARM chip, and my normal development thing is like a x86. Cross compiling this application, which is not just DVUI, it has all of curl TLS libraries. It's got all of FFmpeg, right, running on here to play the audio, right? Like
Right.
it just worked, just to like cross compile and put it on here. Super exciting, yeah, super good.
Wow.
What was I going to show? Oh, right. So, for example, here in the let's go back to the screen share,
Yes.
Loris, if you
work on it.
um,
There we go.
all right. So here when you run the example, if you go to the debugging stuff, you can say convert mouse events to touch. And so now, like to scroll this window, I like press down on the mouse and drag down, like exactly like a button. So that kind of stuff, right, is something that I put a lot of work into trying to get various touch stuff working.
That was an awesome demo. Holy cow. Yeah, that was awesome. By the way, also people in chat were really impressed.
All
Wow.
right.
So, out of curiosity, how does audio? So now that I'm guessing you're not using GStreamer anymore for your podcast.
That's correct. I'm using FFmpeg directly.
Right. And what do you use to I don't know, do you open like an audio device from your application, or do you somehow like sub-process to FFmpeg? How does that work?
It runs in application, so let's go look at it.
Okay, so are you saying that FFmpeg also takes care of opening like an audio stream?
No, so I'm using the SDL.
You're using SDL
audio
stuff.
device.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But like, look at all this stuff that just works. Like I've got like libxml in there to like parse, RSS feeds.
Right.
And all this stuff. This is not pretty code, right? This is just like one giant file. But it's also got SQLite, right? Because that's where I'm persisting all the stuff in there. Let's see where I wanted to pull up here's like the SCL open audio device stream stuff. And then just a second. Where is the FFmpeg stuff? Audio callback. Here we go. Playback thread. So I've got a separate thread that is responsible for doing the FFmpeg stuff. So here we got AV format stuff. Find the stream info, and then all this. You have to set up this whole graph of things. that sorry, it took me so long. All right, here we go. So like I'm going to set up this FFmpeg filter. God, I forget what this is called. Thing, create filter graph. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. And you have to like wire all this stuff together correctly, and it took me forever. So please,
Yeah.
if anybody out there is trying to use FFmpeg from Zig in somewhat this way, like please steal this code for me, because it was so many hours of like nothing coming out of the speakers.
Uh-huh. I see. That's awesome. Okay, so let's go to I guess the final question that I have for you. So let me bring you back full screen. So I guess my question for you then, you mentioned already some of the stuff that Zig helped you with. Overall, what was your experience? What were the best parts of it? What was the most frustrating parts of it? It's been 4 years, right? So you saw a bunch of Zig development over time. I don't know. What's
Yep.
your impression?
Honestly, the most impressive thing, the thing that's made the biggest impression to me about Zig, is the willingness to try things and then either make a hard turn, like with the switch to the WASM stage 1 stuff
Mhm.
for bootstrapping, or like the for loop changes. Just the recognition that there are many small changes that could make the language, a little bit better in this way, or a little bit easier in this way. But the sum total of adding, 1,000 kind of extra little things kind of adds this baggage to the language that makes it difficult. And just the having the courage to say no, we're not going to add 1,000 little niceties that everybody has to remember. That's the thing. That's the thing that I feel like is like, yeah, Zig, like it's going to be fantastic.
I see. You did mention, I think, that you made a proposal in the past.
Oh yeah. I
What
feel
was it?
like like my experience being part of the Zig community is somewhat stereotypical. Like I sort of joined the community, and after a while, I was like, hey, I've got a great idea for making the language better. And then I even hacked the compiler to put it in. It was um if you call a function, like if I say graph dot do stuff, if you use that syntax to call something, then if the function signature looks like, what would this be? This would be like, yeah. All right. If it looks like this, then you have to worry about what happens if if this function is getting called with a copy of graph instead of a pointer.
Yeah.
And so like, sometimes the way you fix those bugs is you explicitly say, I want it to be passed by pointer. And so I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you use the dot syntax to call a function, it enforced that the function signature had to have a pointer. And like, I went down that path for a while, and I thought it would be fantastic. And eventually it was like, well, yeah, it does prevent some bugs, but it makes other things harder, especially with like enums. And eventually I was like, you know what? These Andrew and everybody else have a pretty good idea of what they want. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to trust in their sense to do the right thing. And I feel like, more recently, there's some other, Loris, isn't there some other proposal that deals with this problem in some other way? I forget exactly what it is, but
Yeah, there have been changes about the semantics of passing something by value compared to the past. Because
yeah.
previously it was you pass something by value, but then the compiler internally could make it a pointer. But this is going away because it has soundness issues that are
Yeah, yeah.
the same unsolvable. Yeah, so I guess status quo changed in a different way, I guess, in the end.
Right. And that's the kind of thing that makes me really excited. Like just the willing to say, look, this is not the right solution. We don't know what the
Mhm.
right solution is. We're just going to wait. And then eventually we find it. Like I've had a bug open for a while about slices bytes.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what DVUI uses internally to take any piece of data and turn it into a byte slice and store it. And the question is like, how does that handle Sentinel values and the blah blah blah? But then that's getting overtaken by something that mlog merged recently about at pointer cast,
Hmm.
which it solves that problem in like a better way. And so the
Hmm.
language is getting simpler and more powerful at the same time, which is like super exciting to me.
What about annoying parts? Like, what was the worst of your experience with Zig?
Oh man. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I feel like everybody that comes to Zig just dealing with strings, the it just trips you up. Like if you say Alice, like what's the type of this? It's like a pointer to a, what is that? Like a 5 with a 0 sentinel thing, right?
Yeah.
But but then you're trying to pass that to some function that wants a slice of U8,
Yeah.
and then you end up in this like thing where you're like, I don't know what to do, and then eventually you read some blog post that says, oh, you just put like an ampersand in front of it, and then everything works.
Yeah.
Or
Wait,
like,
I
banging my head against some error message without reading the part that says like, oh, it's just a const problem.
yeah, you definitely need to like to scale up your understanding of those symbols and their relationships. Otherwise, you cannot be productive with Zig. That reminds me, I think you wrote a blog post, right? That is like I believe it's like a recap of all these conversions. Am I
Oh yeah,
misremembering? Yeah.
I put it on Zig.news.
Yeah. Which, by the
Yeah, I've had
way,
some stuff on there.
yeah, I was aware about that of that blog post for a long time, and like I just made the connection. It was actually you, like a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, nice. So that was awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to show us DVUI. I think it's an amazing project. I mentioned that I used it. And the what I'm working on, it's not like this big secret. Like I worked on for a while now. It's I posted for like a couple months, but I've been working on like a chat application, and I wanted to try my hand at doing GUI stuff. And I remember having to choose like, what do I start with? And while
Hmm.
yeah, when you make an application of that kind, you don't necessarily want to immediately uh, commit to any GUI thing, but you want something that is representative and that helps you like move your prototype forward. And the experience with DUI has been very, very good, to the point that I started thinking, you know what, this is going to be what I use maybe for now. Maybe in the future, if I have like more, let's say, quote unquote, production grade needs, I will switch to one of the more established ones, like, I don't know, DRM GUI or whatever. But yeah, so far it has been a blast. It was great. So yeah.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, I wonder why DVU has that chat demo thing, right? It's because Loris said, "Hey, I need something that does this," and I was like, "Oh man, yeah, we gotta um, level up the things surrounding that."
Nice.
And I should say, so Loris has prompted me to start a devlog. So on the DVUI page, I'm starting to put like random little things about various corner cases of DVUI and stuff like that. So
Oh, that's
um,
awesome. So if anybody uses RSS feeds, do subscribe to that devlog, and not only yours, but like I need to do some more communication about this. There's starting to be a few very interesting devlogs out there. Mason Remali made one that is about his work on game dev. There's of course the one from the core team of Zig on ziglang.org. DVUI is another one. So hopefully as we move forward, there will be more interesting devlogs from the Zig community, because this stuff is really awesome to see. Everybody going down in different directions. Everybody learns something interesting and unique that you will not find in any Zig book anytime soon. Not to say that you shouldn't try to read any Zig books. You should go do that. But there is so much interesting stuff happening out there that you can only learn if you interact with the people doing that interesting stuff.
Yeah, totally. It's fantastic.
Well, David, do you have any final words before we end the show?
I'll just say thank you, everybody who watched, and come ask questions on Discord if you want, or file issues or whatever on GitHub. And Loris, thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. So everybody, see you next showtime. Goodbye.
This is how we